Test, test. There it is. Cool, working. I'll pop out the chat. Alrighty. Let's turn these ads off. There we go. Cool. Alrighty, we've got Mr. Lou, Elijah, Mick, Brezit, Marco. Marco, I've seen you on the last stream that we did on this channel a while ago. Now, we've made some changes. If you guys, anybody who was part of the last stream, Dev Stream 1, that we did before, I think the campaign system looked a lot different. It was a lot more basic. So I'm happy to say we've made it a lot more interesting. We've expanded on it a lot. I don't have anything to show you that's concrete from gameplay yet. We're still working out some concepts, but the battle system is pretty much designed, and the node traveling system, where you move your army around, is designed. The overarching layer, which is like the third layer of the game, is not fully settled yet, so I'm curious to get your feedback on some of that. So like this layer, where we see the map, is not done just yet. However, if you've seen the dev diary we posted, you'll know we've got like the whole concept worked out for the node map. I'm just trying to find a picture of what that looks like. It's probably under, let's see here. I think I found it. 1 second. Yeah, this map is kind of like this one here that we were working on. But I'm trying to look for the node map that we had. Also, this one's all supposed to look like something like this when the art is done. So this would be more of like the polished visual, and then these are like the concepts of how it's going to look. I actually don't have an image of the node map, but yeah. Veal Guard, how are you, man? Let me move this over. Cool. Yeah, so I just want to get some of your guys' opinions on this. I'm thinking this is like the general area that the game is covering. And these are the possible regions that could generate. When you play, though, not all of these regions are going to be on the map, right? So I might hit play, and it will randomly select, let's say, this is what's played over for one generation of my campaign. And then you're going to fight over each of these regions, and each of those regions has its own... Let me try to look for the map, the node map. Let me see here. Stretching it as far as Livonia for the Russian would be home. Yeah, I think that's what we want to do. Let me see if I can find... Okay, here it is. Right, just so for clarity, when a player goes to a region to campaign there, they get like a randomly generated map like this that's made, where you travel node to node with your army, and you have encounters and events and battles and all kinds of stuff. But this is kind of your overhead map that you're not going to be spending much of the game on. It's kind of just like a minor part of the game that contextualizes your campaigns. Great Britain and France playable. Honestly, Gruff, I can't confirm it. I'll just be completely straightforward. I'm like 99% sold on including Britain and France, but I don't want to announce it formally until June 1st, or at least let me clarify that. I don't want to make a decision formally until June 1st. So I want to give myself the time, about a month, to sit on it and really think about it before making that official. That being said, I'm going to act in such a way that assumes France and Britain are fully playable nations, so we have the big five in the game. I'm going to make that assumption that that's what we're doing. But I don't want to formally make that decision until I've had a month to really think about it, for obvious reasons, right? I don't want to commit to it and get you guys excited and then we develop the game for another month, and then I back out of it. That would suck, right? So I'm also thinking, in addition to doing this, that we're going to rename the game from Master of Command Prussian Glory to Master of Command 7 Years' War. And this way, because we're kind of covering now all of Central Europe, I think that's a more appropriate title. And it should get people more interested in the game, because currently the game is being seen as so niche, and a lot of people think you can only play as Prussia, and that's hurting the game a lot. Now, obviously, we have no gameplay out, so of course there's not a lot of buzz around the game, but any kind of interest there's been or people talking about it, I think they get turned off immediately when they go, oh, you focus on one country. It's like a linear game. You just play one country and it's done. All right, I'm not interested. But that's not what we're creating, right? We're trying to create like this big, dynamic, replayable game with lots of nations and units. And I think that's what I want people to think of more. And I think that's going to help the marketing and just like people's understanding of what the game's about. But yeah, I'm curious to get like, there's 25 of you guys here. The chat is nice and small. I'm going to be reading everything you guys say, as long as it's on topic, right? So if you're just hanging out and you're not sure what to say, if I ask for your guys' opinion, I'm going to be reading everything. So, you know, there's a reason I did this on the side channel, because I typically read. You guys are here for this specific purpose. On the main channel, people don't even know what the hell the game's about. But anyways, yeah, I'm just prefacing it because I would really appreciate each individual opinion that I can get here. Yeah. So basically what I am, what's it called? Basically what I'm thinking about is the pacing of this regional map. So I'm going to give you guys like a short presentation of how this is going to work, and then you can give me your opinions. So let me pull up the map again. Let's see. One moment. There it is. Okay. So how this will work is this. Player selects what country they want to play as. So I go in, I choose Prussia, I choose an army composition I want to start with, I have my camp of my troops, then I'm taken to this map. When this map generates, not all of these regions are going to be at play. In fact, it's probably just going to select a random shuffle of regions that we're going to fight over. So this way your 7 years war experience is a little different every time you generate a game. Okay, so in one generation, maybe Central Europe is not really fought over as much, and it's more focused on the eastern half. In another generation, when you hit start, it's going to generate a map that looks more like, like this, and you're fighting very much over the western area in through Central Europe down to Bavaria. So it's going to be a little different every time you play, which I think will be interesting. And every region has kind of its own characteristics, its own description to it. Let me try to find a specific example for you guys. I think this one has one. Ignore the arrows. The player doesn't need to go. This is not like a mini game where you have to like choose location to location and go in order. So ignore that, please. But this is just to show you every campaign or every like area you can campaign in has an enemy presence there. It has a difficulty, and there are some rewards there. The rewards, giving a player like a unit, I'm not a big fan of. So I think that reward system I've got to work on. Maybe we'll talk about that later. But for now, like you'll have like set difficulties and you'll know which kind of countries are occupying each region. Okay, so let's say I choose a region to go into to campaign. A fully randomly generated terrain map is made with villages and rivers and forests and such. And I get to see my army on this map. And that army gets to move around. So this is like the enemy camp area. And then this is my army. Every time you move, you're consuming supply. And every time I move, I'm risking like an enemy encounter, or I go here and a pop-up comes up about the local villagers there, or I go here and a pop-up comes up about troops I can recruit from a local town, and so on. So this is the more interactive part of the game that you're going to be spending a good amount of time into. When you do when you do encounter an enemy, that'll launch you into the real-time battle system. So you can really think about this game as 3 layers, just to draw that out. So it's like you have the 3 layers here. We have like the European side of the campaign. And that's where you have like regions that you can select from. And then when you go into a region, you've got like roads and rivers and areas that you can kind of direct your army through. And these nodes that you can visit. And then you've got the battle system, which is real time, where units fight each other in line battles. Okay, so those are like the 3 layers. To me, the most important parts of the game are these 2. It's like planning your military campaign and executing on it with battles. This is just to contextualize like where you are, and it just basically like announces what kind of modifiers you might run into. I also have a piece of paper here That is another example. So let's say this is my generation of what regions appeared. Ignore this key at the top. I don't really like that, so we're just going to say 1 star is 1 difficulty, 2 stars 2 difficulty, 3 stars 3 difficulty. I don't want this system. I don't want the regional map layer to be too complicated because I want the main focus of the game to be this. So the regional layer over here does not need to be very complicated. In fact, if it was complicated, the player would have to like memorize how the battles work and how the node system works and how the region works, and it's too much. That would actually become kind of confusing. So it's actually better, simpler the better, in my opinion. To go back to my paper map I drew here, you'll actually have a list of like modifiers on the sides of each region. So here it's like, oh, this area is going to have a lot of forests, or that area has some mountains, or this area with the boot means there's going to be a lot of hostile nodes in that area. This symbol means there's going to be a lot of stores that are generated, or like freshly stocked villages. So every time you pick a region, there's like a slight amount, there's like a couple modifiers that could affect the generation of that area. So you're not playing on like a similar node map every time. The generation's going to be altered in some random way every time you play. Now, in real life, geography is definite. So, for example, it's not like the mountains in the Alps shift every time you play or something like that. So the terrain will be consistent every time you play, but the modifiers of like there's a little horse symbol with the mountain, which means this time when you played, there was actually a lot of horses in that area to buy, but the mountains are always there. Anytime this region is selected, let's say that's like Bohemia, you can always expect some mountains. The shuffle of those mountains or like how they generate is different, but you can always kind of expect the terrain there. So that's kind of how this map works. Let me think. Sorry if I'm a little bit scattered. I'm just trying to think of the best way to kind of like explain everything. Okay, yeah, so I'll walk you through. Player gets the amount of regions generated for their campaign. They select one to fight in. They go through a series of battles and encounters through here. They fight the final battle of the region to secure it. Then they come back to the map after securing it, and that region now lights up and says, hey, you've secured it. That's yours. Does that make sense? As far as like you dive in, conquer the area through battles. Then when you finish the final fight, you go back to this map and you see it lit up green like you own it now. Then you're back to this map. So now let's say this is lit up green. I conquered it. Okay. Now when you're back to the map, it's 2 random regions are going to flash red that are now about to be contested by the enemy. Here's what that means. That means if I go to select the next region I want to conquer, and let's say I select this one, when I get back to the map, these are going to be gone. They're fully occupied. You can't fight for them anymore. It's like your opportunity is over. They fell. So these are basically saying, hey, you have this limited window right now to jump over here and contest these as your next region to fight over to stop them from permanently getting rid of this region. Let's pause for a second and answer some questions because I don't want it to get too complex because there's a lot of layers we're kind of juggling right now. So let's pause and let me answer a few questions before we progress further. So Veal says, you really have to sit it out first. I don't mind waiting until the official release instead of getting distracted on future DLC. Yeah, I'm not even planning DLC right now. I think Veal, I think you were talking about the nations, Britain and France I was talking about. I'm not even thinking about for DLC. I just want like the big 5 countries in the game. Macbeth or McBryce says, would the difficulty be procedural as well, or would certain regions always be more difficult than others? I would say the difficulty would be procedural. So like, for example here, this could be a 1-star area. That's a 1-star. This is a 1-star. This is a 2. That's a 2. And then these become 3s. And the reason why, well, let's say this became a 3. Let's say that was originally a 1. If the enemy contests it, which they will, every time you come back to this map, they're going to pick 2 more regions to contest. It bumps up the stars. Now it's 2 stars here. Just to say, hey, like there's more enemies in this region for you to fight against. Faceless, this game will not be free, no. Will you be able to fight in more than 1 contested area? You get to choose one. You only have 1 army, so you get to fight. You get to choose to fight in 1 area every time you're back at this map. So here I'm like, all right, these areas got more difficult, or do I want to just like not bother contesting them and go for a lower difficulty area? So you can kind of choose which areas you want to jump and contest. Now I'm thinking, what purpose is there right now? Why would I even want to, in terms of game design, why do I even want to contest them? Like, it's more difficult, so what does that mean for me? So I was thinking, if each region has some kind of reward, that reward now gets amplified. So you have risk because it's harder, and you have reward. Now you get even more from it. So I can really like potentially lose my whole army but gain something awesome, or I can play it safe. And it's going to be like tic-tac-toe, right? So if these two regions fell and I took this one, then I get to the back to the map, and then they're going to contest 2 more random regions. Now I only have 2 options anyway, so I'm just going to choose to contest this area. And then, of course, they take this one because I didn't bother. I can't be in 2 places at once. They took that. So now I took 3 regions. They took 3 regions. The last region left is the home region. Now we fight over that to determine who wins. And if depending on how many regions they've managed to secure is how much amplification their army gets. So if their army was normally going to be normal sized, it's going to be 1, 2, 3 times the size because of all the regions they secured, it's going to be a little harder to fight. And that's that last. So you're kind of punished for taking the easy way out to only go for the uncontested regions. So not only are you missing out on a potential reward to fight them there, but you're also letting the enemy get stronger. So that's why you may want to contest them on occasion. And that's kind of what I'm thinking for this system. So it's pretty simple. I think it's pretty simple, but I don't want it to be too complicated. I just want it to be like some overarching context where like I go secure this area, you secure that. I secure this area, you secure that. I secure this, you secure that. And then once all the regions have been fought over, we launch into like the final headquarters battle. That's kind of what I was thinking. Okay, so now I'll answer a couple more questions from you guys. Will you be able to fight in more than one... Oh, I already answered that. If the map is fully taken, can you reconsider the taken area? So once the map is fully taken, that's when you launch into like a headquarters final assault. Now it's you and the enemy, you fight to the death, and whoever wins is going to win the whole thing. That's my idea for that. Just to be like a big dramatic ending. The Shrodsman says, are there other regions able to be occupied by friendly AI armies? We're not going to do like AI armies or anything. One thing that's kind of interesting about this war is that... specifically with Prussia, they just have this like one main army with a couple garrisons spread out everywhere else. They have like one other army that's helping out in Hanover, but it's not doing too much. And so, what's it called? I just wanted to focus more. I don't want to have like lots of AI armies running around. And like I said, the whole point of this is just to keep it simple. Gruff is saying, would the final battle be winnable without higher tier rewards? Why would somebody play 1 star if it would be easier but weaken their later game? Yeah, I can see that being a potential problem. I would say, Gruff, if you prioritize the 1-star areas, your army is going to come out much more intact. So the end battle is going to be harder, and you're going to be missing those rewards, but you've got like a full army at full health that's like not been battered at all. But if you've been constantly contesting regions, there's a chance that your army is just getting really beat up every time you're coming out of those. And so it's compensating you with decent rewards. And by the time you get to the final battle, maybe only half your army is left, but at least now that final battle isn't as difficult. I know what you mean, though. Like, you're basically making the game easier for players who are performing better, which is maybe a problem. Reingard, I don't want to stream on the main channel because every time I do, no one really knows what's going on, to be honest. And I get just as many people watching on that channel than I do here. Not just as many, but it's not many more. So I don't see it. Plus, I just like this is a bit more personal, and it's on the correct YouTube channel for this, so I can just talk to you guys specifically. In other words, not going for contested areas would allow the enemy to keep the initiative. Kind of, yeah. It just means the enemy kind of gets to fully secure and lock down those areas. Reingard, we will have infantry, cavalry, and artillery. Sorry, artillery. All of those kind of unit types will be in. Can you modify your army when you're in the main map section? Yes, you'll be able to click the camp view, and the camp view will look something like this. And you can kind of take a look at your military organization structure. But yeah, I think this is the least developed part of the game, is this regional map. And just to give you guys some like context, I'm trying to keep this as simple as possible without it being too simple, but also I don't want it to... Like, there's already so many layers of this game. You have the whole battle system, which is going to be like a lot of skill and time that you're really going to have to put into to master those battles. Then you've got these node maps that you're traveling on, which you've got to choose which path you're going on, the logistics, the terrain you're encountering. This is like, think of like Napoleon in northern Italy or Napoleon in Egypt, waging these specified kind of military campaigns in these areas that contain multiple battles. That's what this is. And then think of this as like Napoleon's grand map on the wall, showing like, hey, I've campaigned in Germany, I've campaigned in Russia, I've campaigned in Egypt, and so on. That's like this. I've campaigned in Brandenburg, I've campaigned in Silesia, and so on. So this is more of like a Hall of Fame that just kind of shows like the areas that you've conquered for this playthrough, and which areas the enemy has secured, and you're kind of gobbling up regions against each other, against the enemy, and waging these military campaigns and fighting battles. And that's kind of how I'm contextualizing everything. If we were to add things in like an economy system and province management and diplomacy and technology, and that massively expands the scope of the game, so much so that there's no way it becomes unmanageable or unrealistic. And it just adds too many layers onto the game, right? So that's why we're not going for that traditional strategy games system, because we already have this interesting kind of like node system where I'm moving around and waging my military campaign and moving over here, crossing rivers, fighting battles, encountering locals, and that sort of thing. Does everything make sense to you guys so far? Like, do you kind of have a clear overview of how the 3 layers of the game works in that way? And do you have any questions regarding the system? Okay, a decent understanding. Yeah, it's a little complex. I think it'll be easier when you're playing it. It's a little harder to explain. Welcome to the new people who are joining the stream. I see we have almost 40 people here, which is cool. 30 to 40. So welcome, new people. I'm reading the chat with everything you guys are saying. So if you want to get an opinion in or ask a question, then feel free to do so. But yeah, just to give you guys another example of like a playthrough without moving to these other maps or having to over-explain anything, let me just give you guys an example of like, all right, I play as Prussia. I randomly generate a campaign and it comes out like this. Okay, I go and conquer this region first. The enemy contests these two, and I go to the area they're contesting and I beat them there. They're then contesting these 2 areas. I decide to let them go and I go here. They're then contesting these 2 areas and I decide to beat them there. And then they're contesting these 2 areas and I decide to beat them there. Okay, now that we've gobbled up all the regions, we count how many they have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And they add some additional strength and they come in to do a final battle at the headquarters. And this determines victory in my campaign or not. So that is kind of like, it's like a little bit of a tic-tac-toe going back and forth until we have a definitive winner. If the front lines look disjointed, that's actually a good thing, because in the real 7 Years' War, look at how messy it was. Like, everybody's just kind of jumping around. Look at Frederick's territory out here. It's completely disconnected in Silesia. So it's actually fine if a player, imagine, like, the enemy secured this and you secured that. Like, that's actually still fine if it turns out like that. But yeah, the questions I have is, like, how we feel about this system in general, I suppose, and also what the kind of rewards and modifiers are on each region and how that kind of impacts gameplay. Yeah. Are the units you start with automatically historical, or are they auto-generated? So you'll have these set compositions that you can choose between. I don't know if I have any good up-to-date artwork. I'm realizing how difficult this is to explain all this. If I had more artwork, like, I'm literally using pieces of paper here, so it's difficult for me to get everything organized for you guys to show off, because everything's such a work in progress. Let me see if I have an example of, like, the army selector. I don't think I do. This is a really old example. God, there's got to be one somewhere. On the spot, I just can't find a lot of the stuff. This one shows, like, it previews the army composition you're going to start with, and then you can choose which army you want to go in with, and then choose which country you want to pick. And these army compositions start off locked, so you can only play with one army type at the start. And then if you complete challenges, every playthrough you do, you unlock new army compositions that you can play with. And they might be wildly different. Like, one might come with almost a full army, but no money, no resources, and really low-quality troops. Another one might come with just a single division with the highest quality troops, and that's going to completely affect the way you approach these kind of, like, node maps when you play. All right, I'll catch up on some comments here. If a unit dies, do you lose it completely or keep the assets? That's a good question. I think you would actually get to keep its equipment, and it would just go back into your inventory, but the unit itself dies. I'm pretty sure that's how it's going to work. That's a good question, though. So Gruff says, so the map doesn't really matter. You choose regions based on difficulty and rewards. Gruff, I think that's kind of how it is currently, yeah. I'd be open to changing the system because it's the least developed part of the game. Like, everything else is programmed in. Even this map generation, the seeding, and the random generation with terrain is all finished. It's not visually finished, but it is functioning. And you can move around on nodes and travel and fight battles. That's all working. The battle system itself is also fully working. You can engage in combat. We have the morale system. You have volley fire, animations. All of that is done. The least developed part of the game is this part here. So I'm kind of open to suggest. How do you guys feel about the system? Is it a little confusing? Do you think it's too simple, too complicated? Like, I didn't want this system to be too important because this should just be context, just some loose context about the war. And the main meat of the gameplay is about like you and your army traveling and picking up new troops and doing encounters and fighting battles and that sort of thing and managing your army. This is just kind of like to set the scene a little bit. But yeah, to get your guys' general thoughts on that, I don't think I explained it too well. I probably should have built a better presentation that had more like mock-ups of UI and that sort of thing. But I hope I got most of the points across. The one thing I'm considering with this system, if we go for it, if you play as Austria, how does this map work? Does it like... So let's say I play as Austria and the map generation looks like this. We contest a bunch of regions and we fight over them. Okay, where does the final battle take place if I'm Austria? Do you guys think that the final battle should always take place in like your home region? Like your headquarters doesn't really mean anything. It's just marking on the map where the final battle would be fought. Would you fight it in Prussia always? Would you fight it at the home region of the country you're playing as? Would you fight it against the enemy? Like, I'm not sure where the last battle should thematically be set in. Does it make sense that you're like scrambling up regions and then you have to defend your homeland to win? Or does it make sense to scramble for regions and then invade the enemy's headquarters to win? Because historically speaking, Prussia won by just holding on to its kingdom, and it fought like its last battles right outside of its home area, and then the enemies left and signed a peace treaty. But would it make sense if I was playing as Austria to fight like a Frederican invasion of Bohemia to determine if Austria holds its occupied areas and wins the war? Or would it make sense if Austria fights into Brandenburg? I would just want to make it consistent, though. I don't want to have to program it differently based on what country you're playing as. It would be nice to just have a consistent system. So either we make it so you always fight at the enemy headquarters to win the final fight to see if you win, or it's always like, can you defend your homeland to win? What do you guys prefer? What makes more sense to you? Or I could hard code it so it's always in Prussia, but that might be a bit weird. Mick says, I would say you always fight it in the contested areas. For example, so if in the end you fight, and if you fight Prussia there, it would only be a region to fight. Interesting. So you're saying whatever region happens to be left is what you guys fight over. That's not a bad idea. So maybe I could get rid of the headquarter idea, because headquarters don't really mean anything. So we could get rid of the headquarters idea and just make it so whatever is the last region to fight over is the final battle. We could just do it like that. So I would secure like this. They would secure a couple. I would secure that. I'd maybe contest them for this. We'd fight over for that. And then whatever is the last one left, that becomes like the final battle naturally. Or should we have a more like maybe an animation pop? The other thing is like we could just fight over this. And then what I could do is like, let's say the map looks like this, an animation could pop up. And I could leave it ambiguous and just say, hey, the final army is ready to engage you. You guys have fought over this area. How are you going to, who's going to win and take everything? Or something like that. There's a couple options we could go with. I'm curious to see what your guys' thoughts are. What would be most clear to you? You can see it's a little like confusing. Like this part is the only part of the game that I think is hard to wrap up cleanly. Whereas the other systems make sense to me. Like you're always progressing toward an enemy headquarters on the node map. The enemy strength always grows every time you're progressing. You're fighting battles along the way. This part is like a very clear gameplay loop as you're pushing through to the enemy camp. This part, I'm just kind of on the fence about that. I'm also wondering if like the final battle should be an actual battle or if the final attack should be like a region you have to fight over. And maybe in that region, they're coming toward you and you're running away or something like that. That I could do. But yeah, I think right now I'm just figuring out like how this system should be integrated in. What are some things you guys like and don't like about the system? The thing about making it a poll, I don't know what I'm even really polling for right now. Like, what are the options in the air at the moment? Is it that you get like everybody just scrambles for the regions and then you just have a battle at the end? Or you scramble for the regions and whatever's left is the final region to fight over? You scramble for the regions and then a headquarters is always reserved for the final attack. And if that headquarters is reserved, is it the enemy one or is it yours? Those are all kind of questions up in the air that I'm still considering at the moment. But it's difficult to make that a poll because I don't know. That's a lot of explaining and a lot of options and repercussions for each of those. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. You could also take some time to think about it, especially in the Discord if you want to write out a longer written response. I'm curious. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else I want to bring up. But in general, do you guys think it makes sense? Like, I think I can figure out the rest through trial and error and like sitting down and drawing out some more concepts. The thing I'm just unsure about is like, how do you guys think this should end? How do you think the game should end currently? Like you've been building up, you've been campaigning, you maybe been contesting, like going to contested areas that the enemy's in. You're back and forth, you're gobbling up territories on the map. How does it end? What do you guys think intuitively makes sense? Do you take the fight to them? Do you like fight for your homeland? Do you fight dynamically about like whatever region happens to be last? Do you get launched into like one set piece battle to end it all? Or what is the ending that you guys envision? We can do a poll at the end, but I'm just curious. That's a lot of options to poll for. I'd like to narrow it down based on what you guys are thinking. You can take what you can, and then when there isn't any free land, you could call it. Then fight the enemy until you take their all. That might extend out the playtime. I feel like if you've got to then fight over all the enemy regions, it's too much. I think it makes sense if you fight over the last territory. It'd also be more dynamic because the last region could change based on... Yeah, that's true. It should all end with the land being the players or the enemies. Fight for the homeland. Making the final battle always impressive makes it feel like you're fighting the same thing. It's too repetitive. I think that would be too repetitive, yeah. I think fighting for the homeland would be more engaging. Yeah, I don't know. I could put up a poll and just kind of see... So fight for the homeland would mean like we reserve the player's headquarters. And that has to be fought over at the end. The other idea is that we reserve the enemy's headquarters. So we have the player's headquarters that's reserved for the end, or we reserve the enemy headquarters for the end, and that's what's fought over. Or you just happen to fight over whatever's left as you and the enemy are randomly picking regions to kind of fight over. Or you fight over all the regions, and once everything's gobbled up, a pop-up comes up and says, hey, here's your final battle. Based on everything you've done, based on all the regions that you and the enemy has conquered, here's what you've got to fight. And it's just one single battle. That's also an option. I'm a bit new to the stream. What happens if you lose in a region? Would it affect? I think if you lost a region, the game ends. I think you just fail. I think that's how I want to do it right now. I want to make it pretty brutal. You're only going to have one army, and if you fail, you're done. So I want to make it current. Like, I haven't play tested the game yet, where like there's a lot of mechanics up in the air. So I've done the battle in isolation. I've done the node map in isolation. I haven't done a complete playthrough with everything together. If I find that that's too punishing, I might change that. But I couldn't give you a definitive answer until we've had more development to like test these systems out. Yeah, I think a single battle would be a bit boring at the end. You could fight over the last region you were first to capture, but now you need to defend it or something like that, yeah. I think it's unfair to have the player lose because they lost one territory. Well, if the enemy took a territory that you didn't go into and they took it, that's fine. But if you tried to go into a territory and you lost your whole army and you got completely wiped out, then you're done. I don't know how you would recover from that. Does that make sense? Like, so if the enemy was contesting these areas and I ignored them and they did fall, I don't lose. But if I did go in here and my whole army gets destroyed and I screw up and I have nothing left, then I'm done. It wouldn't be that you would come out of the region, the enemy would have it, and now you have basically nothing. Your army is super weak. You go in here, you definitely lose at that point because now look, it's a 2-star and your army is super weak, so you lost that one too. And then look, at that point, what do? Everything is gone. So I don't mind if it's got a more of a hardcore experience, kind of like what Frederick the Great really had. If Frederick the Great just got his entire army wiped out and captured, then he would be done. You could spend leftover resources for bonuses in that last battle. I don't know. Fighting for whatever region's left makes it less repetitive. Yeah, that's interesting. How do you guys feel in general about difficulty? Would you like it if the game was... Would you guys like it if you couldn't save? It was a hardcore experience, which I'm already thinking of making that a mode. You have to enable like Iron Man mode or something. And yeah, you can't save, and if you lose, you lose, and that's that. The other alternative, or the other way to play would be not to do hardcore, so you can at least reload the save. But I still think if you lose, you lose. If like your army gets wiped out, it's done. Which I would imagine if Frederick the Great, the king of Prussia, got his entire army lost and he was captured in battle or something like that, then the war is pretty much over. So I don't know if the player should have like multiple chances unless they're reloading a save to try it again. I wouldn't mind a little modifier. So I'm going to have... Okay, here's one other explanation you guys don't know about yet. Let me go to the camp view. Let me find the most up-to-date camp. 1 second. It's hard. Nothing's too organized on Discord right now, so it's hard for me to just pull stuff up on the spot. Where would it be? Maybe... Gosh, hold on. Why is that not working? The from command doesn't work on Discord anymore. Look, from doesn't do anything. So I don't know how to search for a message by Nico, because Nico posted the art for the camp and I do not have it. How do I do from? I thought from worked, right? On Discord? From? That doesn't do anything anymore. That's odd. So I have no way to pull up the camp screen. That's frustrating. Because they got rid of that. Just give me a second. Let me scroll through and see if I can find it. There we go. I did find something. Okay, this is the newest camp screen. So each officer has abilities that they can pick up through a skill tree. The unit can gain veterancy. And then the player himself has these tactics, strategy, and recon, and logistics that you can put points into. I got rid of this You guys might not like this or not. I don't know. But I got rid of this. And instead, I was thinking the player would just have stratagems, which are like little modifiers, permanent modifiers, that affect their army. And they are single things that you can hover over, but they have really big effects. So instead of like putting lots of tiny points, like 1, 2, 3% plus morale and 4% extra something and 8% scouting ability or something, instead you get these big modifiers. So for example, this one could be called Miracle of Brandenburg, and it could say, if you lose a battle, automatically come back and recover everything for your first loss. So you only get it once. It's the Miracle of Brandenburg. If it happens one time, that's it. But that would be that. Another one could be one big stratagem here, and it says like cavalry officer, all your cavalry is 50% cheaper to recruit. So they're like really big modifiers that make your and they're completely random. You would gain a stratagem every time you conquer a region. So if I get to the enemy camp, if I go through this node map and I get to the enemy camp and I win, I get a pop-up that lets me choose between like 3 stratagems that are huge things. They could even come, some could come with a pro and a con. One could say like, if I take this one, all infantry costs 20% more, but my next 3 artillery units are free to purchase. And now it's like, oh, okay, that's a massive pro and con. So they're like huge effects instead of lots of little ones that you can collect. But anyways, I brought that up because for Prussia, an inherent stratagem that all their army compositions start with could be the first Miracle of Brandenburg. Devin, it's very similar to Slay the Spire, yeah. It's like the relic system in Slay the Spire, but for history, for like a commander's personality. And what I think would be cool is if every nation had a unique stratagem that they start with, and then you can earn more stratagems by completing regions. Yeah, I think warrior, that would be cool. Like the major stratagems would be the ones that you earn from beating a region at the final battle, and then the minor stratagems could appear from encounters and little event pop-ups. I think that could be cool. We could lean into Slay the Spire even more and have certain battles on here be like in Slay the Spire, they have regular fights and then elites, and then you have the boss at the end. This could be our boss, and then we could have like little, see how this is a mini camp? That could be like a proper army that's there. Whereas over here, there could be like a small encounter. So if I moved over, or a small like skirmish. So if I moved through here, I'd fight a small skirmish battle, but if I saw this on the map and went to it willingly, that would be a large battle, but I get to earn a stratagem at the end of that. And then when I finally get to the enemy camp, that's where I get the big 3 stratagems, and I can pick one big one I get permanently for the rest of the thing. So that could be kind of cool to do that, to have like smaller fights, smaller skirmishes out here, and medium-sized fights, and then the big boss battle at the end, if we want to lean into that further. That could be kind of cool. Yeah, Crucivon, that could be cool. I know in Slay the Spire, they have relics. Every time you beat the game, more relics are added into your next playthroughs that you could encounter. So it could be cool that every time you finish a playthrough, more stratagems are added that you could appear your next playthrough. So you might finish a Prussian game, you might win, or you might lose and be like, what's the point of playing again? But then it says, hey, 3 new stratagems have been added that you could randomly encounter next time, one of which makes Grenadiers completely free to upgrade to. Anytime you need to promote a unit, the promotion to a Grenadier is completely free as Prussia. So it's like, oh wow, I could do a Grenadier playthrough and have a shit ton of heavy infantry with grenades. Okay, I want to go jump back in and try that out and try to find that stratagem. So that could be kind of cool for replayability, and that completely alter the way that you're playing the game. There should be, yeah. I'm going to take a picture of these and put it into my Discord. There. Sorry, I just wanted to take a picture of your guys' feedback there. Okay, so hopefully that gives you even further context about like how this works. So every time you're conquering these regions, you're picking up stratagems. Um, Now that you have even more context about how the game works, do you guys have any other final opinions before I wrap up about the region map or like how this works? That's the idea though. Among Us, that would be overpowered, but that's kind of cool if each stratagem feels like it's really powerful. But then we'd make the enemies really, really difficult. So your battles are incredibly difficult to fight, but you have these crazy overpowered stratagems that you have to play into that really influence the way you're building your army. I think that's kind of fun because it makes the game super challenging and dynamic in that way. And it's super rewarding to find a crazy stratagem that completely alters the rest of your playthrough. I don't know. That'll have to be balanced, obviously, and play tested. I was just coming up with those off the top of my head, but I think it's kind of fun to do that. I don't think I would give it the enemy stratagems, no. I think the enemies would just get like big armies with really powerful units, and you just kind of have to face them how they are. But you, as the master of command, you're the master. You have all these like stratagems under your sleeve that are helping you get that advantage to take on bigger armies. Will, I already have it planned that every other campaign you fight will be a winter season. So it'll be winter, it'll be cold season, warm season, cold season, warm season for every region that you're fighting in, back and forth. Will the armies be procedurally generated based on the player's army? I would say they will be randomly generated, but they're not going to be based on the player's army. Because I don't want the game to say like, oh, the player's doing well, let me generate a gigantic army they can't beat to try to knock them down. Because then the game feels like it's punishing you for doing well. So I don't like when games try to generate enemies that are harder because they see that you're doing better. I think the difficulty should feel super consistent, and this way you play it a few times, you might lose, but then every time you play it, you're coming to expect you kind of have some consistency and idea of how the difficulty is, and you can play around it, and it feels really rewarding to beat it. Imagine, for example, you play Dark Souls, and every time you fight the boss, if your character was really weak, the boss is really weak. And if you were really, really strong when you go to fight the boss is even stronger. That would be weird, you know? But if the boss has always got this consistent difficulty that you can expect, if you come and fight that boss too early, you lose. You might lose 3 or 4 more times, but then finally you got it, and you are getting really good, but the boss is not getting any better. It's consistent, and you finally beat him, and that feels really rewarding. That's how I like in games. Like, I don't like when the difficulty is constantly scaling at all times to try to make things easier or harder for you. That's just my opinion, though. Rambling, I don't think on this regional map we'll do any kind of diplomacy because I really want to focus the player on like being a general, like one commander. So think of like Grant or Lee. Like Lee isn't at the negotiating table figuring out what happens to each state after the Civil War. Like his whole world is in the context of waging the campaign in Northern Virginia. And in this, your whole world is like how you're going to eject the Austrians out of Silesia and your homeland. It's not like negotiating peace treaties and writing up deals and building towns and that sort of thing. I guess that's it for now, though, guys. If you have any other further thoughts after listening to the stream, I'll leave the stream live. You can write in the comments or go on Discord and leave some comments there. If you're not in our Discord, I'll post it. And I'd love for you guys to write what your thoughts were about the stream and about the region system. And if you have a giant essay you want to write about it, or if you have a little paragraph or a single sentence, that's fine. I'll read anything that you guys have to say. But yeah, that's about it. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll continue working on this. All right, see you guys. Thank you for joining.